Ladies, gentlemen, and Spiritborn of all ages, after a roller coaster of a few seasons of being at the top of class power to the bottom of class power and then everywhere in between, Spiritborns as a class have been kicking some serious butt in Season 9, and today we're going to go over my version of the build that is doing it, the Quill Thorns Balazan's Maxtlatl setup that turns your thorns into poison and then back into thorns, but we aren't doing this for the raw damage of any of these things individually. Instead, what we are doing is abusing the hell out of the Jaguar primary Spirit Hull option. This tallies up all of the damage that you are actively doing, and any time that you deal 15 hits to an enemy, you get an extra hit that repeats a percentage of the damage you did to that enemy in the last half of a second. By itself, this is just generally quite good, but what makes it the main engine of the currently strongest build this season is the fact that it has a lot of double dipping properties, by which I mean effects that are calculated in the initial damage that it tracks to decide what will actually do when it triggers, but then also that damage number that it creates also gets boosted by the same effects a second time. This includes things like the Plains Power aspect, which is why we are playing around Mystic Circles. The base damage of the Spirit Hull proc is boosted by the circle bonus, but then the actual proc itself also gets boosted a second time if you are in the circle when it happens, and this works with a number of other effects that are quite powerful too. So we stick all of them together as much as we can and just build around having as many hits as possible to just maximize the frequency of the Jaguar Spirit Hull itself. That said, this has never been straight up called a bug by the developers, but it is also probably not an intended interaction that has this many double dips, so a quick warning before we jump in that if you build into this, they could decide to just nuke the interaction at some point, but in my mind that is something that they are very unlikely to do during an active season, especially when Spiritborn's strongest builds without this interaction are quite far behind right now. That said, this build isn't quite as fast as your Eagle Spirit Hull evade builds, but it still moves reasonably fast, and importantly, it kills extremely effectively too. The main weakness that it has is that you are a little bit squishy, in fact more than a bit squishy, but you're essentially a very big glass cannon. While you can lean a bit more defensively if you choose to and survive a bit more, that will actually cap you out at lower content than if you were to go fully into offense in this setup and just literally blast everything before it can kill you. So today we're going to talk about that. I'll mostly be showing this build that I use for most of my gameplay, which is more of a speed farming setup, and I will also talk about how to adjust it for something like pit pushing, as well as any upgrades that I would apply to it if I had access to them, as my item luck has not been great so far this season, and there are plenty of things that could improve what I've gotten myself. To put simply, the true ludicrousness of this build comes when you get better and better razor plates. A lot of our damage scales off of thorns in this setup because of the Balazan's Maxtlatl interaction, and so even an ancestral razor plate is a massive upgrade over a non-ancestral, a good roll on the unique effect is a massive upgrade over a bad roll, and then every greater affix past that just makes you significantly stronger, with people that have 2 greater affixes being way stronger than I am even with this beautiful piece here. As well, this means that masterworking your razor plate is extremely important too, especially because every affix is thorn, so you can't really miss, though of course if you hit a greater affix you get slightly more value. All that said, let's start off with the skill tree and where we put our points. Starting with basic skills, you won't need this as soon as you get your resource generation sorted in the build, but we put 1 point into Rock Splitter as well as 1 point into its enhancement, mostly to let us pick up the next cluster. And here we're going to be picking up Quill Volley as our core skill, and this is the main skill that we use to trigger all of our proper damage procs. Any one of the core skill options that Spiritborn has can work with this technically if you prefer to play with them, but for the properly optimal version of the setup, you want Quill Volley into Advantageous Quill Volley over here. This gives you extra hits per cast, but it also increases the amount of damage it does to an enemy the more feathers that hit them, but overall we want this mostly for the extra feathers because this gives us the most frequent generating of the Jaguar Spirit Hull proc because it's the most number of hits we can get, and again, the Jaguar Spirit Hull is our main damage source in this build. We then also have a legendary aspect that basically doubles the hits from the Quill Volley as well to make that even better. We grab 1 rank of the Vigorous passive to increase our resource generation and to help our ability to just fully spam out Quill Volley unceasingly until the end of whatever combat we're in. Then we have our Focus Cluster. Here we pick up Vortex as a skill that we can just use to group enemies up and pull them together. This helps us proc our key passive for some bonus hits and then fuels the Jaguar primary Spirit Hull even further as a result. We take the enhancement for this skill as well as Measured Vortex for an increase to Vortex's damage and also a knockdown effect when we have a barrier, which we will have 100% uptime on. We then also grab the Ravager skill. This adds an extra hit of Jaguar damage on top of any of our other attacks while active, so it both helps proc the Jaguar primary Spirit Hull quicker and helps build up the potent passive that we'll be talking about in a minute. We also grab the enhancement for this, and then also replenishing Ravager to make it create even more bonus hits against elites and bosses, which is fantastic to increase our single target damage especially, and get us more Jaguar Spirit Hall procs. Then we also pick up Toxic Skin as a skill too, as well as its enhancement and Measured Toxic Skin. The main reason we want this is Measured Toxic Skin because it will give us passively double Thorns damage against poisoned enemies, in a build where we are applying poison damage scaling through our Thorns. So basically, this is just free. We don't need to actually activate Toxic Skin at any point, and in fact, you can just sort of leave it on your bar and let it do its thing passively, and you'll get pretty much most of what we're getting from it anyways. We also then pick up a bunch of passives in this cluster, 1 rank of Mirage for a little bit of extra crit chance after an evade, and dodge chance during your evade as well, then 3 ranks of Unrestrained Power for a solid damage multiplier while we are unstoppable, which we should be most of the time with this build. We've also got 1 rank of the Focal Point passive for some extra block damage reduction because we are using a quarterstaff, and then 3 ranks into the Apex passive for a significant damage bonus against vulnerable enemies, which is also doubled against elites. Then we also take 2 ranks of the Diminishment passive for a significant damage reduction from vulnerable enemies too. Then we move on to our defensive cluster, and here we have Armored Hide, as well as its enhancement, which makes it give us Thorns while it's active, as well as the actual reinforced Armored Hide for increased block damage reduction per nearby enemy. This is our main defensive ability, and the fact that using it fills up our resolve stacks as well is the main thing that it does to keep us alive. Then we pick up another load of passives in this cluster too, 1 rank of Endurance, which mostly just lets us take 3 ranks of Perseverance for bonus damage reduction per stack of Resolve. 1 rank of Patient Guard for some extra block chance, which is nice, but this also just lets us get more passives too. It lets us put 3 ranks into Auspicious, which gives us just a passive barrier generation if we don't take health damage, and this means that we can just have a nice little safety net at the start of any combat that we walk into before we build up our defenses mid-fight. Then we take 3 ranks of the Bastion passive as well. This gives you extra Thorns per rank that you have, which of course is big for scaling our damage, but also even just having 1 rank in this passive gives you 20% multiplicative increased Thorns while you have a barrier active, and again, we'll always have a barrier active, so this is just massive for our scaling. Then we take 3 ranks in Anti-Venom for a pretty large amount of increased poison resistance and increased maximum poison resistance too. 3 ranks of Nourishment gives us increased healing in general, as well as increased poison damage after we heal, and because our Thorns damage is applied as poison, that then scales into our overall damage in the way that it works. Then we take 3 ranks of the Resilient passive down here, and this gives us 15% increased maximum life for 10 seconds after we cast a Gorilla skill. We should be using Armored Hide once every 10 seconds at a minimum, so this should always be active. We then also take 3 ranks of Potent, and this puts a debuff on an enemy when you hit them with a Jaguar tagged skill that increases the damage that they take from you until they die, up to a maximum of 30%. So this is a 30% damage multiplier for everything that we do, and that's quite lovely, honestly. Then we move on to the ultimate skill cluster as well. Here we pick up the Hunter, which is just a nice, frequently usable ultimate, the one that you can use the most frequently of all of them, and that's honestly the main reason that we take it here. As well, the enhancement here makes it overfill your ferocity when casting it, which helps scale our planes power aspect too, and it also gives us increased damage against injured enemies, which is nice as well. Then on top of that, we take the further enhancement, which gives it a chance to instantly reset its own cooldown if you kill an enemy while the effect is active. Then we grab a bunch of passives here too, 3 ranks of Resolution, which makes an ultimate skill cast increase our damage to elites for 3 seconds afterwards, which is doubled if there's only 1 enemy, which is mostly just for bosses. Then we take 1 rank of Sustenance, mostly just to let us take 3 ranks of Intricacy. This makes it so that we cast our ultimate skill, the last skill that we used with a cooldown can then be cast again, up to 3 times, freely, without a cooldown, without a cost, no problem at all. The main ways that we use this are either for Vortex when speed farming, running through areas, so that we can have a bunch of Vortexes we can cast back to back, pulling enemies along with us, grouping them up, and then nuking them down, because a lot of our damage does really, really well if there's a lot of enemies in a very confined space. As well, this means that you can pull enemies along with you while you move so that they don't slow you down. Otherwise, you can also use it defensively with Armored Hide specifically. If you want to have Armored Hide, just pretty much have a 100% uptime, you can make that happen by using it before you use your ultimate instead of playing around Vortex that way. We also take 1 rank of the Initiative passive to give us a little bit of Unstoppable every time that we cast our ultimate. We take 1 rank of the Spiritual Attunement passive, but this is mostly just to let us get 3 ranks of Supremacy, and this is an absolutely bonkers strong passive. Anytime that we kill an enemy while our ultimate skill is active, we gain a stack of this buff, increasing our damage up to a maximum of 30%. When an ultimate skill ends, you gain 5 stacks of Supremacy no matter what. And because of the way that the Hunter works, with the fact that it is the most frequently spammable ultimate. That means that it functions really, really well with getting the resolution active, as well as getting as many stacks of supremacy as possible, because it also ends as frequently as possible, more frequently than the other ultimates, which means even against a boss, you can gain significant stacks of this buff by just spamming your ultimate. Then finally, for our key passive, we have Noxious Resonance. This makes our critical hits against poisoned enemies pop the amount of poisoning they have instantly for a burst of damage around them, not just to them, but around them. This generally just increases our damage, even in single target, but in multi-target it gives us a load of bonus hits specifically to proc primary Jaguar Spirit Hull even more frequently, which again is the majority of our damage. That does it for the skills then, so let's talk about the Spirit Hull. Again, primary hull choice is Jaguar without a doubt. It's the main thing that we're doing in this build, and as a result we are using the unique as well that boosts Spirit Hull potency. If your Spirit Hull primary and secondary are matching, so our secondary Spirit Hull choice pretty much has to be Jaguar. This also means that we have increased maximum ferocity, which is great regardless, and it lets us just frequently generate ferocity even outside of our ultimate skill too. Moving on, we have our Horadric Spellcraft choices for this build. The catalyst should be Disintegrate. This just gives us a really frequently activatable effect that lasts for a long time as well, to apply the actual arcana bonuses and the infusion bonus that we have too. On which note, you can use the poison infusion on this for just pure damage, as it will boost our general poisoning, which boosts our damage as a whole, but the damage of this build is so high that I generally recommend using the shadow infusion instead. You don't gain too much from using the poison one instead, and this mostly is just for the fact that using shadow reduces enemy damage pretty passively if you touch them with the disintegrate beam. And given that we are a little bit squishy, any bit of extra damage reduction is very useful. As for the arcana then, we have Bottled Wind for a ton of barrier generated every time that the beam starts blasting. We have Reactive Ooze, which gives us a relatively constant 20% of our maximum resource generated per second, and then Invigorating Helix for fortify and healing gained quite frequently from damage with our catalyst, which then also helps boost our survivability. As for the slot that we attach this to, we put it on our ultimate skill slot wherever you decide to put that on, and this is specifically for the fact that it works with one of our Horadric Jewels to give us a very powerful buff. That said, now let's talk about our legendaries and uniques, as well as any mythic uniques that I would include in this build if I happen to have them. Starting off with the uniques first, Razorplate is a super obvious important one for a thorn scaling setup like this one. This just has thorns in every affix slot and an effect that boosts your thorns damage. The more greater affixes this has, the more damage you will do. So running Lord Zir or running Belial and choosing the Lord Zir cache is probably the best way to get a potentially massive damage increase once your build is up and running to begin with, because you just want as many greater affixes as you can on a Razorplate. That said, the next required piece to make this work is the new unique pants that Spiritborn has this season, which is Balazan's Maxtlatl. This makes all attacks against close enemies trigger 150% of our Thorns stat as poisoning damage. Every time we have our natural Thorns hit an enemy, it also increases the damage that this effect does, up to a maximum of 300% bonus damage from the effect. Getting a maximum roll on the effect is super important to your damage. The ideal greater affix is Bastion, the passive, as that results in more bonus Thorns than having a GA on the Thorns roll directly. Then our third unique is going to be Loyalty's Mantle. This makes our Jaguar Spirit Hull do way more damage, as well as giving us significant cooldown reduction for our ultimate skill and for Ravager as well. The ideal greater affixes on this are damage reduction and then all stats secondarily. The most important stat to have is a unique roll itself actually as a maximum roll, because you want that to be 60%. It is even more important than having just an ancestral version of this item to begin with, because that massively affects our damage. Then we have our legendary items as well. In our two-handed weapon slot, we've got the Plains Power aspect. This gives us a scaling damage bonus for every stack of ferocity that we have when we are standing in a mystic circle, as well as ensuring that we stay at maximum stacks while inside of it. This also gives us lucky hit chance to create the circles to begin with. The downside of this aspect is that it means that we need to play around the circles when they drop on the ground to maximize our damage. It limits your movement, but the amount of extra damage this gives you is immense, and for most speed farming content, we are strong enough with this build that you can mostly just ignore the circles until you get to a big beefy boss, or unless you're doing like pit pushing, and that's where it really pays off to have this. On our amulet, we have the Conceited aspect for a big chunk of bonus damage percent while we have a barrier, and we should always have a barrier. On our gloves, we've got the Vehement Brawler aspect for bonus ranks of the Hunter, which lowers its cooldown a fair bit further, as well as giving us increased damage for 8 seconds after we cast our ultimate. Ideally, we will keep this at 100% uptime by casting our ultimate within that window. On our rings, we've got the Rebounding aspect, which basically doubles the amount of hits that we get per cast of Quill Volley, making Jaguar Spirit Hall even more potent. Then my other ring currently is the Intercom aspect, specifically for bosses, as we get a significant damage increase when standing still from this, and you can stand still against a boss. That said, this build would be improved by one specific mythic unique, and it would be instead of this Intercom ring, and it would be the Ring of Starless Skies, which I haven't gotten lucky enough to find myself yet. This ring makes the vigor cycling of the build way more manageable because of the resource cost reductions. It gives you a ton of attack speed on one of the affixes, which is also the ideal greater affix for us. It gives us increased lucky hit chance, which helps with our resource generation as well, and it helps with the Ahu offering generation from the rune that we'll be talking about in a moment. And then of course, just the 50% bonus damage from the actual effect itself is exactly what it says on the tin. It's really good. And altogether, that is of course much better than a standard legendary ring, even with good rolls. Then I should also mention the boots, which we have the duelist aspect on here, which just gives us increased maximum ferocity, which is really nice as well. For the actual affixes on the gear then, on your weapon you want dexterity, vulnerable damage, and chance to restore resource, ideally in a speed running setup. If you have some survivability issues, you can drop the vulnerable damage for maximum life in the meantime. The resource, however, that affix is incredibly important. It is mechanically functionally requirement for the build, as without that lucky hit chance for resource generation, it's just not sustainable with good attack speed. For the tempers, you want primary Jaguar Spirit Hall potency increase and Mystic Circle potency as well, with the ideal masterworking priority on this being primary Jaguar Spirit Hall potency, of course. On the amulet then, your ideal rolls are dexterity % increase, which is a massive damage boost, ranks of the potent passive, which is absolutely perfect for us, but apex and unrestrained power would also be solid passive options if you have them on an amulet. Then the third slot should be total armor %, just to make sure that you hit the armor cap. Then if you have passives on the amulet, that is your masterworking priority, otherwise the % dexterity increase. For the tempers, you want Mystic Circle potency and the Hunter cooldown reduction. On our rings, we are aiming for dexterity, attack speed, and then all element resistance to make sure that we get a little bit closer to resistance caps, as those are much harder to hit this season. For tempers, we want Mystic Circle potency and the Hunter cooldown reduction. Mystic Circle potency is the ideal masterworking priority on the rings. On your gloves, we want dexterity, attack speed instead of my maximum life roll here would be ideal, and then a nice chunky armor roll is really useful as well to again help you hit armor cap. For the tempers on this, you want Mystic Circle potency, which is our masterworking priority, as well as vortex size increase to let you pull in enemies from further away. Then finally for our boots, you want dexterity, movement speed, and maximum life, or you can sacrifice some movement speed for armor or resistances if you need to while you're getting started to begin with. For tempers, you want movement speed and then another vortex size increase as well, and the masterworking priority for the item is dexterity for pure damage or maximum life for some more survivability. For our gems and runes then, in your empty equipment slots you want diamonds for the all stats to help boost your Paragon stuff. For the actual runes, we want the Pock rune, which generates offering when you spend a resource, and the Q rune for Druid's Earthen Bulwark, which is just a big chunk of barrier when it procs. Then in our weapon we have the Ahu rune, which generates offering on lucky hit against injured enemies, again even higher chance if you have the mythic unique that I don't, and then we have this with Cax, which spends all of your resource to basically double your damage for 1 second after it procs. This is when our resource starts to get eaten really hard when we're attacking injured enemies, but combined with the damage to injured enemies bonus on our ultimate skill, this means the moment an enemy hits the injured state when they're under 35% health, they start to absolutely melt. And for the most part, that's when most enemies are the most dangerous. For our Horadric Jewels then, the Seal of Denial gives us 30% increased barrier, fortify, and thorns within our setup, all of which we are using, so this is absolutely fantastic. We also have the Myriad Stone, which gives us a whopping 30% attack speed for 10 seconds after we use our ultimate because we have our catalyst tied to our ultimate. So ideally, this should be 100% uptime. Then the final jewel is Idle from Below for increased main stat, maximum life, and also the unhindered effect as well, with the only cost being that you have to kill some bonus elite enemies occasionally, which is just not a big deal. Moving on from that, we have our mercenary choices choices for the build as well. We have our main mercenary as we're here, and this is mostly just to bring him down the right side through the 15% bonus resistance to all elements, especially because resistances are just harder to hit this season. We then continue down though to get a just general player damage increase, which is really good because we don't care about Rahir's damage, we care about our damage. So let's use Rahir to boost our damage. Then for your reinforcement, you just got Variana, who we've got with the Earthbreaker ability, which knocks down enemies, and we've got this tied to anytime that we cast a skill in combat, just so we get some more CC during our runs to help us survive a little bit easier. Finally then, let's go over our Paragon board setup for this build as well. For the most part, I'll only be mentioning the important bits to stop at, as the pathing nodes along the way are relatively clear why we take them. As well, you might have way less Paragon points than me, or you might have way more. The important thing is to hit the glyph sockets, the legendary nodes, and then any rare nodes that I specifically call out as important. And if you have more past that, fill in more of the rare and magic nodes ideally, as well as the nodes that increase your glyph effects, the nodes that are in the radius and that matter. That said, from the starting board, we go up the left side for the survivability rare nodes. Then in the glyph socket, we put in the canny glyph. This increases our non-physical damage just in general, as well as putting a debuff on enemies that makes them take more non-physical damage from you anytime they take non-physical damage. We pick up intelligence within the radius to activate this secondary effect. We grab both of the rare nodes on the top side of the board, then we head out to the exit and attach on the next board, which is Viscous Shield. We put this in the default position. We make sure to stop on the right side for some barrier generation and also some lightning resistance. We stop on the left side, rare nodes over here, for some damage reduction while we have a barrier and also some vulnerable damage increase. We grab the legendary node for the board, which gives us increased damage depending on the amount of barrier that we have. This is one of those effects that double dips on the primary Jaguar Spirit Hull, which is very good, of course. We then also grab this rare node up in the corner for some bonus armor and also maximum life. We round over to the glyph socket for the board, and in here we have the Revenge glyph to increase the potency of the two rare nodes that are in here too, and we'll be grabbing those as well. But then also, this applies a debuff to enemies that makes them take more damage from thorns every time that you deal thorns damage to them. Then we take the intelligence within the radius to activate that effect as well. We then exit out of the top side of the board through the barrier generation rare nodes over here to get to the actual next board, which we're going to be attaching on Spiny Skin, a Thorns board. We put this with the legendary node in the bottom right corner. We go up through the cooldown reduction and maximum life for our magic nodes. Those are very valuable. We wrap around to the legendary node itself, which gives us a whopping 35% bonus thorns. It's basically an extra damage multiplier that is fantastic for this build for 5 seconds after you use a cooldown. We will be using cooldowns every 5 seconds, so this is just 35% bonus thorns, full stop. We then go up through the rare nodes here into the glyph socket itself, and inside of this one we'll be putting the Hubris glyph. This increases the actual effectiveness of all magic nodes in the radius, and the secondary effect is up to 3,000 bonus thorns based on how much dodge chance you have. So if you have like any dodge chance, this will give you a decent chunk of bonus thorns. We take the rare nodes within the radius, we take the strength to actually activate the effect as well. Then we grab this rare node up here for some all element resist and thorns, which is a lovely combo. We head out through the left side of the board, and here we're going to be attaching on the sapping board with the legendary node in the bottom left. We immediately head up over to the glyph socket itself, inside of which we put the ritual glyph. This increases our Mystic Circle potency, as well as giving us a multiplicative damage increase, as well as a damage reduction while we are standing inside of the Mystic Circle radius. We grab the one rare node within the radius that actually helps us properly, then we start circling through to the legendary node itself. We pass through an attack speed rare node, which is incredibly good. It also has dodge chance, which helps gives us the actual thorns from the Hubris glyph. We go through the resistance to all elements and maximum life rare node here as well, into the legendary node itself, which gives us a 30% general damage increase whenever we cast 3 of a Gorilla, Jaguar, Eagle, or Centipede skill in a row, and it also restores 15% of our vigor when we do that. We'll be doing this with Quill Volley just constantly, so we should have this at 100% uptime, and this also helps manage our vigor just a little bit more. Then past that, if you have more points than I do, the next thing that you would do is just take the few points over here, so we go through the resource-based rare nodes over here, and then we go out the left to stick on our final board, which would be the Convergence board, for increased damage scaling from our elemental damage damage increases, which we have a fair amount of anyways. And on that board, you want the Wildfire Glyph, which scales our fire damage, as well as, very importantly, giving us a lucky hit chance, which means that it scales with the Ring of Starless Skies once you have that, to give us cooldown reduction on direct fire damage from our skills. We have a ton of different ways of applying fire damage, and so this effect activates constantly. That does it for how to put the build together actually then, so let's talk about playing it very quickly. For the most part, you want to keep 100% uptime on Ravager, you want to use Vortex to group enemies up, you want to use Armored Hide for defenses, and then spam Quill Volley and the Hunter ultimate. Because of the Intricacy passive, you want to make sure that you use Vortex right before the Hunter if you're wanting to spam Vortexes and group enemies up constantly, or alternatively, if you're in a moment where you want more survivability, make sure that you use Armored Hide before you use the ultimate instead. For the actual gameplay, make sure you are as close to your target enemy as possible, because our Quill Volley setup basically works like a shotgun. You want to group enemies up as closely as you can, so that all of our effects can overlap their damage as much as they can, and then you just get to watch the Jaguar Primary Spirit Hull go to town. That's it for today, everyone. A deep look at the new Quill Thorns Poison build for Spiritborn in Season 9 around our new unique, with some bonuses from the seasonal powers, making it even stronger. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy using this build for yourself as well if you try it out in-game. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.